this way. Now look what happened. Yeah!
NFL Street is a video game series starting in January 2004, and over the course of the series was released on the PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable, PlayStation 3, Xbox, Xbox 360, and Nintendo GameCube. There were 4 games over the course of the series, starting with NFL Street in January 2004, then continuing with NFL Street 2 in December of the same year, and then in November of 2006, NFL Street 3 was released. This was the last game in the series titled NFL Street, because NFL Tour was released on January 8th, 2008, which can also be counted as the series' estimated time of death. We'll get into that later. Many people talk about NFL Street being the best or their favorite. My favorite is and always has been the original NFL Street. Let's get into this game, and I'll explain why it's my favorite.
This is Flash over Fundamentals.
NFL Street was developed by EA Tiburon and published by EA Sports Big. EA Tiburon worked and continues to work on this very small-scale football series, something I didn't really even know about until I researched for this video. I'm not really sure if anybody's heard of it. It's called Madden. EA Sports Big published games such as SSX and the NBA Street series before being shut down in 2008. Back then, EA actually cared about making more than one game for every sport a year, and decided to make a game a la NFL Blitz, something different from their Madden series, and they decided to use some of the mechanics that had made their NBA Street series so successful. And so was born NFL Street. The game takes a different spin on your normal arcade football experience, because whereas NFL Blitz takes place on the actual football field with players in full gear, NFL Street puts players in basketball jerseys and flip to the side upside-down visors, and has the game played on places such as junkyards, warehouses, and beaches. The game's style, from the menus to the soundtrack to the player chatter, truly represents the year of 2004 perfectly, and while you may think this makes the game age poorly, and therefore hurt the game in hindsight, I believe that it actually makes the game better because it's not trying to take itself too terribly seriously. Or maybe it's nostalgia, who knows. The game is 7-on-7 football, with the goal usually being to score 36 points, although you can change this in the settings. The game puts an emphasis on those key words, flash over fundamentals. Here's the words of one of the developers.
So the focus is on not only doing something, but doing it well and doing it with style, doing it with flair. So you don't just pitch the ball, you pitch the ball cool. You don't just juke somebody, you want to juke them so bad that that they remember it. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about.
Styling plays a huge risk and reward factor, as being tackled while styling usually results in a fumble, but styling gives you style points, which builds up your game breaker meter. Get your game breaker meter all the way up, and you get to, go on, guess what the game breaker does. Guess what it does. I'll tell you anyway. When you use a game breaker on defense after an animation plays, you basically have superpowers, and it serves as pretty much a turnover, although really skilled or really lucky players can find ways to score against it. Now, on offense, okay, I'll be honest, nobody really uses a game breaker on offense unless you're like a score away from winning or something. The game also includes animations after big plays like touchdowns and sacks, where the game gets to add even more personality. Here's some of my favorites.
Poppin' weed, baby, poppin' weed! Where's the D? I can't see the defense! Yeah, everyone's going back! Woo! Who can stop me? Tell me, who can stop me? What? Yeah! Woo! You want this ball? You're gonna have to take it from me. Take it from me, baby. It's mine. Ain't no one in the NFL better than me! Touchdown, baby! Yeah! I done it again! It's not your ball, it's my ball.
Because the game is an arcade-style football game, the physics are super fun. For example, when you play, say, a Madden game, when the ball gets knocked away, most of the time the play is basically over. Of course, you'll occasionally have those crazy plays where it gets batted around and then miraculously caught, but it's not every play that happens. Here, it happens very often, and you'll tend to have many memorable plays that keep the game exciting. And this game desperately needs something like that, because the modes are lacking a lot. There's really no modes outside of spins on the regular exhibition experience. The NFL Challenge mode is basically the campaign mode of this game, where you create a team that starts out terrible and go through every individual division in the NFL, playing challenges that range in difficulty from score before your opponent to shut out your opponent in a game to 24. And eventually, you get your team ready to face every team in that specific division. Once you do that, you move on to the next division. I'll be honest with you guys, I still haven't beaten this mode. The last 2 divisions are controller-breaking levels of difficult. Or maybe I just suck. I don't know. Either way, despite the lack of modes, the core game is so fun it makes up for the lack of content in my opinion. There's even some bonus behind-the-scenes videos that you can watch of developers making the game.
You think what you have is what you have, but you ain't got nothing. I don't even know what that means.
Actually, scratch that. Let's just move on to the next section.
Style over strategy.
I first played NFL Street at around 4 or 5 years old, and it quickly became one of my favorite games, a game that I would play almost every day. There was just something about it that struck a chord with me. So obviously, when I went to a local mall and saw NFL Street 2, I was ecstatic. I bought it, went home, and popped it into my good old PlayStation 2, and while I still had a lot of fun with it, there was still something about the first game that made me want to play that more. Eventually, one day, I walked into GameStop and bought NFL Street 3. However, when I popped this one in, I played it for maybe an hour, hoping to find some redeeming qualities, any redeeming qualities in it, and I just could not find any. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something about the game that just made me not want to play it at all. Recently, I decided to replay it, and I felt the exact same way. However, this time I actually could figure out why. This game feels like it was made in a boardroom meeting between millionaire executives. Obviously, I wasn't alive during the year that Street 1 and 2 were released, but playing them, I felt as though they perfectly represented the era, or at least it felt somewhat authentic, or like they were trying. The entire vibe of Street 3 just feels so unbelievably generic and soulless, and don't even get me started on the gameplay. In Street 1, you spent the entire game building up your game breaker, and then used it to come back or finish off the game. In Street 2, they took this concept a step further and added a Game Breaker 2, which added a little bit of player choice, whether you wanted to save up for the Game Breaker 2, which was a guaranteed turnover if used on defense, or use it just as a regular Game Breaker for the classic Game Breaker experience. NFL Street 3 tried to reinvent the wheel, where instead Game Breakers are basically power moves, where you do a souped-up version of a normal move. So basically, you build up a bunch of Game Breakers that you can use to do a Game Breaker jump or Game Breaker throw or something like that. In my opinion, in this game, they completely ruined the entire point of a Game Breaker. Something I also want to point out before I move on to NFL Tour. Look at NFL Street 1. Look at how everyone is wearing something different, and it all looks like something you'd see or wear during a casual pickup football game. They're all just normal clothes, and the only time someone wears a straight-up jersey is the NFL Legends team that you unlock after beating Challenge Mode. Spoilers, sorry. In Street 2, most people still wore regular street clothes, but now with the addition of jerseys, some players now have kind of that personality stripped from them. However, in NFL Street 2, it isn't that huge of a concern since it's only limited to a few players. Now look at NFL Street 3. Almost, if not every player, has been stripped of their personality because they have a jersey on. The players, much like the game itself, have almost no personality anymore. Now we move to the final nail in the coffin for the series, NFL Tour. It's boring. Bye. But no, seriously, look at this game. Does this look fun to you? This game is perhaps one of the most boring, uninspired games I have ever played ever. It's not even like bad or anything. It's just so unbelievably boring, and somehow it's even more soulless than Street 3 was. Street 3 was generic, but at least I guess they were trying. Tour's menus are just metal gradients, something that you could find on like Google image search. Like I said, it's not terrible, it's just so boring.
Listen, if it's good enough for a certain captain, then Earl Grey is good enough for me.
Did you hear that? No, over there. Wait, what? What was that?
Great one there, laddie. Super stuff. I tried angling once, but it wasn't pretty. fairly certain that guy operating the third spotlight may be getting tired. So, hey, does anyone know where I can pick up some good fishing lures out there? Maybe a spinner, something? You know, this shirt itches. I mean, really. I'm gonna give you a little advice. There's a force in the universe that makes things happen. And all you have to do is get in touch with it. Stop thinking, let it go, and be the ball. See your future, Danny. Competitive line coming in 3, 2, 1. Literally, who's writing this stuff for me? I mean, can we get a real writer? Come on, people. I'm a professional. My contract specifically stated only a certain number of lines, and then you get the same stuff over and over again. Hey, wait, now, I'm just going to say something you've heard last night. I am video game announcer. Hear me repeat. Did you ever notice how repetitive video games announcers are? Why is that? Did you ever notice how repetitive video game announcers are? Why is that?
I get it!
Never mind what I said about this game not being bad. I forgot Trey Rungo is in it. -5 stars out of 5. This game technically isn't by name a successor to NFL Street. However, it serves as a reboot of the series made for the then next-gen consoles, PS3, Xbox 360. However, it killed the series, and we haven't seen a game in it since. Since NFL Tour, so many people have been asking for a remaster of the first 2 games for newer consoles or an NFL Street 4. Unfortunately, we haven't got any word on it, and it seems unlikely that that will happen. Take this next piece of information with a grain of salt, because I don't remember where I read this, but I remember reading that NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said that NFL Street was a bad representation of the NFL since the game was so over the top, and that's why we haven't seen a new entry in the series. However, with the release of NFL Blitz 2012 on the Xbox 360 arcade, I'm unsure if this is true. Either way, despite the fact that the first NFL Street game is now old enough to vote, many people still play the first and second games, whether that's on the original hardware or using an emulator. However, this game series isn't super widely known at all, and I don't see very many people talk about it, so I wanted to talk about it for a little while because NFL Street 1 has been such a big influence in my life because it was such a huge cornerstone of my childhood. NFL Street, in the words of the developers, brought what's been in our heads and in our hearts for years and made it into a playable experience. So even though the last 2 games in the series made me want to game break a table, I still love and adore NFL Street 1 as it was and still is a great game. And that is why NFL Street 1 is my favorite game of all time. Thank you for watching.